There is a kind of pain that doesn't trigger alarms. It doesn't shock you. It doesn't create urgency. It doesn't make you run. It simply stays. It is the pain of a situation you know so well that you have learned exactly how to live with it. It might be a job that drains your energy, a relationship that no longer nourishes you, or even an older version of yourself that no longer fits, yet still feels strangely comfortable. What makes this so confusing is not the suffering itself, but the fact that, even knowing it limits you, something inside reacts to the idea of change as if it were more dangerous than staying where you are. Rationally, you can see that leaving could be better, but emotionally you feel resistance, a vague fear or a kind of internal blockage that is hard to explain. Neuroscience explains that when you remain in a familiar situation, even a painful one, your brain interprets it as safety because it can predict what will happen. Predictability is one of the main criteria the brain uses to decide whether something is safe or not. What is familiar requires less energy, less vigilance, and less adaptation, and for that reason, it is treated as controllable territory. Before we continue, if you're interested in understanding these patterns without blaming yourself, using neuroscience to translate what's happening inside your mind, consider subscribing to the channel. The content here isn't designed to push you into change, but to help you understand why change can feel so difficult for the brain. Neuroscience explains that when you consider changing something important, leaving a place, breaking a pattern, letting go of an old identity, your brain doesn't evaluate this in terms of growth or future fulfillment. It evaluates it in terms of risk. And for the brain, risk doesn't only mean physical danger. It also means emotional, social, and psychological uncertainty. The human brain functions as a prediction system. It is constantly trying to anticipate what comes next so it can prepare. When you are in a familiar situation, even a bad one, the brain already has a map. It knows how you feel, how things usually end, and what to expect. When you think about changing, that map disappears, and the brain enters a state of alert. Neuroscience explains that emotional structures such as the amygdala learn through association, not through logic. If at some point in your life change was associated with rejection, instability, loneliness, or shame, the brain learned a simple rule: change is dangerous. This rule is not stored as a conscious thought. It becomes an automatic reaction. That is why many times when you approach an important decision, the body reacts before the mind does. Anxiety appears, sudden exhaustion, mental fog, or a strong urge to postpone. Neuroscience explains that this happens because the autonomic nervous system shifts out of a regulated state and into threat mode, even when rationally you know the change could be positive. Another central element is identity. Neuroscience explains that the brain attaches not only to environments, but to internal narratives about who you are. Even painful identities, such as the one who endures, the one who adapts, or the one who never changes, provide predictability. They tell the brain how you function in the world, and how the world responds to you. When you consider change, you are not only altering external circumstances, you are threatening a familiar identity. And the brain reacts to this as if it were losing a foundation of stability. That is why imagining change often creates a sense of emptiness or disorientation, as if something is being removed before something new is in place. Neuroscience explains that the body also adapts to familiar pain. Chronic emotional states create predictable physiological patterns. The nervous system becomes accustomed to certain levels of stress, tension, or frustration. When you try to leave that state, those patterns are disrupted, and the brain interprets this disruption as instability, not as freedom. This is what makes familiar pain feel safe, not because it is good, but because it is known. And change feels threatening, not because it is wrong, but because it requires the brain to operate without guarantees. This is why forcing major changes all at once often fails. Neuroscience explains that the brain does not update itself under pressure or criticism, but through neuroplasticity, which happens when new experiences are repeated under conditions of safety. Small, consistent, tolerable changes teach the brain that the new does not have to be dangerous. When you understand this, the question changes. Instead of asking, "Why do I keep staying here?" the question becomes, "What does my brain believe it is protecting by keeping me here?" This shift reduces internal conflict because it replaces judgment with understanding. From that point on, change stops being a fight against yourself and becomes a process of updating. You don't need to destroy the part of you that stayed. It was a survival strategy. What needs to happen is showing the brain, through real experiences, that there are now other ways to stay safe. Neuroscience explains that the brain changes when it learns, not when it is attacked. And learning requires time, repetition, and a sense of safety. That is how familiar pain stops being the only known place, and the new stops feeling like a constant threat. If this way of explaining things resonates with you, and if you want to keep exploring how the brain shapes emotions, choices, and identity, subscribe to the channel. The goal here isn't to rush change, but to deepen awareness. Familiar pain feels safe because your brain knows how to survive there. Change feels frightening because the brain doesn't yet know what to expect. When you understand this, staying no longer looks like weakness, and changing no longer looks like irresponsibility. Both become what they truly are, responses filtered through a system designed to protect you. And the more you understand that system, the less you need to fight against it in order to move forward.